Hi guys, welcome to another social studies lesson. We are going to be talking about the state of California today. The last thing we talked about was how in the Mexican-American War, the United States gained so much land from Mexico, and part of that was California. Today we're going to talk about how many settlers are going to move into California, the reason why, and then how it becomes a state. Alrighty? So, in January of 1848, there was a man named James Marshall, and he was building a sawmill along the American River when he noticed something shining in the water, and that was gold. So, he was one of the first who discovered gold in near Sacramento, so kind of in the middle of California. And he really wanted to keep this discovery a secret. However, it didn't happen. News got out, and by the end of that year, 6,000 miners were searching for gold in the area. As more and more people started finding out, thousands and thousands of people made plans to go to California for this instant wealth. People didn't really understand that concept before, but now that they had this new mineral that was accessible to them and that they can go and look for, then they knew that there was a way for them to get rich fast. So a lot of people left their families, a lot of people left their jobs and things like that because they were planning to go to California to get that gold and make money for themselves. Because of all this flood of people going to California, they named it the California Gold Rush. By May of 1849, there was more than 80,000 people from all over the world that traveled to California. And because of the year that this happened, these people were known as the 49ers. And yes, that's where the football team gets their name. That's also the mascot of Cal State Long Beach. And it's basically because of the year all of these people came to California. Although most of them were Americans, a fourth of all of these people came from different countries in the world. Some people came from China, some people came from countries in Latin America, some people came from Australia, and other countries in Europe. Most of them were unmarried men just because they didn't really have ties or a family to look after, but there was a lot of opportunities for women because there were men who would come in. They didn't really have families to take care of them and things like that. The women would make money by cleaning houses, cooking food, washing laundry, things like that. Okay, so let's talk about that trip to California. Trips usually took about 3 to 6 months. So especially if you lived in the East Coast, there were different ways you can reach California. One of the ways that some people took was sailing around the South American continent. So they would sail all throughout the Atlantic Ocean, around South America, and then reach California on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. Or they would reach Panama, which is like right in between North America and South America. They would land in Panama and then just cross into California. Or they could also take the trip across the country, so through the Great Plains, through the Rocky Mountains, and then reach California that way. So regardless of the trip that they took, it still took a pretty long time to get there. In 1846, just to kind of give you an understanding of how many people and how quickly people moved into this area, in 1846, there was only about 1,000 Americans who lived in California. But 4 years later, there was 100,000 people who lived there. So the population grew super quickly, super fast. But with that came a lot of discrimination. So, like I mentioned, there were people from all sorts of places that lived in this area, including natives, Chinese, Latin American people, and even African American people, and they faced a lot of discrimination from the white settlers. People who mined for gold, white people who mined for gold, try to keep the non-whites from taking gold. And also in 1850, California passed a law that didn't allow non-whites from speaking against whites in court. So, for example, if a white person was in court with a Chinese person, the Chinese person was not allowed to talk against the white person. So this law was kind of unfortunate and discriminatory, and it lasted until 1872. Okay, so mining for gold was kind of took two different paths. So at first, looking for gold meant panning for gold. So kind of like you see in that first picture, it didn't take very many tools to look for it. It was just a lot of hard work trying to look for gold. But by 1853, most of the gold that was on the surface in these rivers was taken. So mining companies formed, and they used machinery to find gold. Most of the machinery used hydrolonic power, which is water power, so water pressure. So this hydraulic machinery would blast water into the mountainsides, and it would kind of cut through the mountain and the gravel, and eventually ended up destroying thousands of acres of California land. And it was just because they were trying to wash away the silt that was in the mountainsides so that they can find the pieces of gold that they were after. Because of the location, San Francisco became the center of trade for this region. It was ideal because it had a harbor, it was near the gold mines, and a lot of people were living in this area. However, the way that most people made money in San Francisco was not the same as everywhere else in California, because in San Francisco, panning for gold wasn't really the way most people made money. Instead, the people living there, because there were so many people moving into and out of San Francisco, the people who lived there made their money by selling and making clothes, feeding these people, housing them, giving them supplies, entertaining them. So they relied more on the people living there to help them make money than actually looking for gold. Alrighty, so let's talk about how California became an official part of the United States as a state. Remember that we gained California, or the United States gained California after the Mexican-American War. And it was just a bonus that gold was part of the deal. So when all these 49ers came in 1849, there was enough people living in California for it to become an official state. The people that were living here kind of needed some order and some laws, because there was just a lot of people everywhere. They weren't really following rules. So they wanted courts, they wanted land and water laws, they wanted a mail delivering service and other government services. So in 1849, a group of Californians met together to draft a constitution for their state. This happened in October 1849. So their constitution was signed on October 13th, 1849. And some of the laws that they included was banning slavery. They gave votes to white males, so only white males were allowed to vote for government and things like that and laws. But married women were allowed to hold property. On September 9th of 1849, President Fillmore signed a law that made California the 31st state of the United States. But remember, back then there wasn't fast ways of communicating, especially big news like this. So Californians living in the state didn't find out that their land was an official state until actually a year and a month later, in October 18th of 1850. And when they found out, huge celebrations broke out throughout the state. There was an issue when California became a state because before that there were 30 states. So Congress was equally divided between senators from slave states and senators from free states. So remember, there's 2 senators per state. So 30 senators were from states that allowed slavery, and 30 senators were from states that did not allow slavery. So it was pretty equal. When California came into question, the Southern senators did not want California to become part of the United States because they knew California was going to be a free state. And if that happened, it would give the anti-slavery states more power in Congress. So when it came to laws about slavery, more than likely, it would be about not allowing slavery, and the South didn't want that. So they reached a compromise. It's called the Compromise of 1850, and it allowed California to be admitted as a free state. And this kind of led to a lot of debate, and because of what the compromise consisted of, neither the North or the South were happy with the decision. So let's look at the United States in 1850. So remember, we started off with only these 13 original states, okay? Little by little, we gained the Ohio Territory, then we gained the Louisiana Territory, and the Oregon, and then this territory from the Mexican-American War. So all of this was part of the United States. If you notice this area, it's still unorganized, so that means that it's not really part of the Union yet, but eventually it will be. So the United States has grown so much in such a short amount of time from the American Revolution. Okay, so let's go back and talk a little bit about Californios. So remember, Californios were Mexicans who lived in California. And at this time, they made up less than 1% of the population, but they had lived on these lands for many, many generations. And although they were the original inhabitants of this land, most Americans considered them foreigners. Many Americans would settle on their ranches without their permission. They would take their lands, and then they would use the laws in place to make unfair claims on the Californios' property. So many Californios lost their lands, and they were kind of treated like if they were conquered people, although they were originally living in this area. Okay, so that's a lot of information, but I want you to kind of think and imagine yourself as a settler in California during 1850. You're moving into this new land and you want to become part of the United States, but you have to have laws in place for your new state. So what kind of laws and requirements would you want your new state to have? And I want you to come up with 3 laws that you think should have been adopted when California became a state. Alrighty, so with this lesson, we're pretty much officially done with all that you kind of need to know for 5th grade social studies. So we are going to kind of stop here with the lectures because the next thing we're going to focus on is the 50 states and capitals. So starting next week, we're going to divide up the capitals into sections just so that you don't have to memorize all 50 at one time. And we're going to focus on where the state is on the map, what's the state capital, and being able to identify them. Okay, so starting next week on Monday, I'm going to give you a set of states and capitals that you need to know. We'll do little practice activities to help you remember these states, but on Friday, you will have a quiz for naming the states and capitals. Alrighty? So look out for that next week, and that's about it. Okay, so make sure you answer this question to the Google Classroom assignment, and I will talk to you later. Bye.